Coming up on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Alaine Pinto, all eyes on a showdown in the Texas State House. The Senate there and state leadership wants a ban of all THC intoxicating products. We talk with Texas J-Man from Weed and Whiskey TV.
It's $8 billion, Jimmy, here in Texas. 50,000 people employed. A lot of people using this.
Plus, the race to become the 25th legal adult use state, and Pennsylvania seems to be the closest with positive changes to their medical program. Other states like North Carolina and even Idaho are launching cannabis reform proposals. And some interesting surveys showing the trend for young adults continues to skew towards cannabis rather than alcohol. And across the pond, King Charles is reportedly using cannabis to help ease symptoms of his own cancer, while the New England Cannabis Convention takes over Boston, where it all began. On Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Alaine Pinto, next.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Cannabis Coast to Coast News, PCM TV's weekly roundup of the fight to end cannabis prohibition. I'm Alaine Pinto. We start off every show with an appeal to our viewers to download our PCM TV app. It's the easiest way to keep up with all of the news from the industry. It is free and it's available in the App Store or Google Play. We start with the Lone Star State of Texas, a state that is led by a trio of prohibitionists, their Governor Greg Abbott, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, and their Attorney General Ken Paxton. All three have tried to shut down the movement by the 8 cities and towns in Texas who have decriminalized possession of cannabis. This time around, it's the Texas Senate that has now passed a bill that will ban all intoxicating hemp products in the state. But remember, there are over 7,000 stores in the Lone Star State that sell hemp-based products, and over 50,000 people are employed in that industry. The Senate didn't care when they passed Senate Bill number 3 this week that banned all THC intoxicating products. The industry is freaking out and hoping that the House will block that bill or come up with one that will allow regulation and sale so the industry doesn't have to completely shut down. When it comes to all things cannabis or hemp in the state of Texas, we've got a friend named Jerry Joyner from Weed and Whiskey TV, who is right in the middle of everything in his state of Texas. PCM TV founder Jimmy Young talked with Jerry last week.
Thanks, Elena. And you know, when it comes to Texas news, the one guy that I think of first is a guy by the name of Jerry Joyner from Weed and Whiskey TV, because he and I met a few years back and we kind of bonded about our passion for the cause. Jerry Joyner joins us now from Texas. And Jerry, I got to ask you, what the heck is going on with your state right now?
Jimmy, thanks for having me on and having a chance to talk about SB 3, Senate Bill 3 here in Texas, that was championed by Charles Perry, a state senator, along with Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. And the Lieutenant Governor in Texas does carry a lot of weight. We all anticipated, all of us that are the 50,000 plus people employed by the hemp industry here in Texas, anticipated this was going to pass through the Senate. They were just hard driving. Dan Patrick actually went out to some stores and tried to do some expose things. It kind of backfired on him a little bit. They were checking his ID, calling him out, you know. But with that, we're anxious to see how the House looks at this. There's no one we see right now that's championing their cause. And so we're excited that the folks in the House aren't just two guys trying to ram something down people's throat that's going to cripple a Texas industry. Is $8 billion, Jimmy, here in Texas. 50,000 people employed, a lot of people using this. And under the guise that children are getting this, that's such a misnomer, Jimmy. Are there bad actors? Sure, every state, every place, there's going to be a few bad actors. But the majority of all the folks in Texas in this space, they want age-gated products. They want child-proof packaging. They want proper labeling. They want C of A's. And these politicians want to ban this. But get this, Jimmy, they want to expand our medical marijuana program called the Texas Compassionate Use Program, or TCUP, which there's 3 players. You can go at a certain time on a certain day at a certain hour and get limited products. So what are all these people in Texas that are using these products going to do? One of our good friends, Lucas Gilcrease with Hometown Heroes, pointed out it should cost the state of Texas close to $750 million in unemployment cost, in people's leases. These people won't be able to sustain their business anymore. And we've got major retailers now in our area, up where you're at on the East Coast, that embrace THC. So we're excited to see what happens with the House.
Well, it'll be a good reality show. What flips me out, though, is you've got a governor, a lieutenant governor, and an attorney general who are anti-cannabis, anti-hemp. They don't want it. They've made it very clear. I saw the article about the lieutenant governor going into the hemp store, and it did backfire on him because they did it the right way. I mean, they actually followed the rules. How is this state of Texas, since you've got a decriminalized medical program, it's this big. We all recognize that there are issues. And you've got, I think it's 8 communities now, towns and cities, including Dallas, that have decriminalized it on their own, right?
Sure.
Is there a chance that there may be somebody in the House who understands that maybe we should have one regulatory body for both sides of this plant?
We sure hope that regulatory issues come into this instead of a ban. Okay, right. What needs to be done to make us all feel good that children aren't getting these products? Right. Jimmy, as you know, you've been on radio for a long time. I've been doing some stuff, and I get often asked about this issue with children. Well, I don't think children are actually going in these stores and buying these products like they try to make us feel through this fear mongering. I don't believe that that's happening. Do children get these? Yes, because of negligent parents. No different than getting an alcohol or the Tide Pod that you wash your clothes with was a problem a while back. So we got to use common sense and make sure and keep these products out of children's hands.
It's education. It's always been education. And unfortunately, the people in the lawmaking roles they don't want to get educated. They don't want to do the due diligence. They don't want to figure out what can be done to sustain what has been a vibrant industry. I believe there's 7,000 Delta 8 hemp dispensaries in Texas. I mean, that
Jimmy, you're pretty close right there. There's about 7,000 licensed hemp retailers. In other words, you pay $158 to get a hemp retailer's license, along with having a business license, and pay sales tax on those. So that's another thing that will be lost with this. But I think it's really interesting in closing out for you here, because I know we just got a few minutes, that our Texas law enforcement says that border seizures are down because of the people being able to legally get hemp. Who wants to go buy from a street dealer when I can go to the corner store and get a pack of gummies, get a couple of drinks, even get a pre-roll in some instances? And what's going to happen when people are used to having these products and they get banned? They're going to have to go back to and now we're going to have a proliferation of who knows what kind of products are in there. Yeah. Or bad products. So
that can sneak their way in, and human nature like that is always looking to cut corners and what have you. Jerry Joyner from Weed and Whiskey TV. Always enjoy chit-chatting with you.
All quiet on the federal reform front. The new administration has appointed many prohibitionists to key national positions at the DEA, DOJ, and FDA. So now we will focus on state reforms. It's still a race for number 25. This week, there were quite a few developments in states that either have a fledgling medical program like Texas, and others like Pennsylvania that has a strong medical program with close to 500,000 patients. Pennsylvania continues to make noise about advancing legislation to form an adult use market. And this week, a bill was passed in that state's House of Representatives that will strengthen the existing medical program. There will be more stringent testing of the products, audits of those products, and lab inspections for those products. Perhaps the most encouraging thing about this House bill was that it passed with bipartisan support, 194-8. It now moves on to the Senate. Meanwhile, the adult use movement is getting an infusion of cash from some of the biggest players in the industry and in Pennsylvania, too. True Leaf, Cresco Labs, Cureleaf, Verano, and Can Tech PA have all dropped thousands of dollars into the adult use lobbying efforts. According to Spotlight PA's report, over $1.6 million was spent for this effort in that state, with True Leaf leading the way with $210,000. Of course, their governor, Josh Shapiro, has already urged his lawmakers to get him an adult use bill to approve and implement. Here's Karen Black with our Arizona Cannabis Report.
I'm Karen Black from Green Finger Consulting with the Arizona Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. A recent study by Arizona State University uncovered concerning levels of toxins in 16% of cannabis samples from Arizona and California. The tainted products originating from illicit sources and seized by law enforcement highlight the risks associated with consuming unregulated cannabis. The research underscores the importance of a regulated market with rigorous testing, and the findings serve as a reminder of the ongoing challenges in combating black market cannabis. One of the toxins, fusarium, is not tested for nor reported on by any state, which may indicate the need for stricter or perhaps broader quality control measures across the industry. Moving to legislative updates, after week 10, 5 cannabis-related bills remain under consideration. One, which would restrict medical dispensaries from locating near preschools and daycares, has reached the governor's desk. Another, which would allow dual licensees in rural areas, failed and was reconsidered last week, only to stall in the Senate. A third measure about advertising restrictions is also facing challenges in the upper chamber. The 2 other remaining bills concern cannabis research and adult hemp beverages. This ongoing process reflects the broader challenges of balancing public health with economic opportunities. In business news, Phoenix's Tilt Holdings has announced a significant strategic shift. It plans to exit its plant-touching operations to focus on its vape hardware business. The move is part of a broader effort to streamline operations, enhance profitability, and get out from under 280E restrictions. Tilt also replaced a board member and announced financial results. Revenue for the fourth quarter and full year 2024 were both down significantly, with net losses also increasing for both periods. The decline was largely attributed to challenges in its Jupiter Research hardware division. Despite these setbacks, the company reported improvements in gross margin and adjusted EBITDA. Analyst reactions to all that news, plus the announcement Tilt's moving its manufacturing from China to Indonesia, was mixed at best. That's all for this week's Arizona Report. I'm Karen Black from Green Finger Consulting, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Another state that is making noise on the reform front is North Carolina. Once again, the state legislature is ready to try and pass an adult use bill. In the past, all efforts have failed in that state that still has strict possession laws, but sells intoxicating hemp products all over the state. They named the Marijuana Legalization and Reinvestment Act as such, and the bill would allow adults over the age of 21 to possess, grow, buy, and sell cannabis. The bill also includes a 30% excise tax on all retail sales and an optional 2% more for municipalities to tag on. 50% of the tax money collected from those sales will go to the Community Reinvestment and Repair Fund. That would also include an allocation to social equity licensees. So, while some of these states are trying to set up programs that can sustain themselves, regulate testing, and keep the product out of the hands of children, others, more mature states, have different issues, even after a decade of operation. So here's Marianne Cursetjee with more from Oregon.
I'm Marianne from Alibi with the Oregon Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. The OLCC, the Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission, has released a preliminary report about hemp products being shipped to Oregon. This project is interesting because many of these products are being shipped direct to consumers from other states. And while I'm not a lawyer, I have been told that states cannot interfere with commerce from other states. The OLCC report highlights a couple concerning issues. Number one, a high THC potency. So basically CBD gummies that also include THC. A lack of ID check so that THC products could be delivered to minors without verifying their age. And unapproved ingredients and labeling. It will be interesting to see how far the state is willing to take this. And finally, plans are already in the works for 420, which is Easter Sunday this year. Stay tuned next week for news about events around the Portland area. That's the Oregon Cannabis Report. I'm Marianne with Alibi for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Our new Maryland reporter, Christopher Bright, is off this week, but there is one story out of Maryland we can share. The State Senate of Maryland passed a bill this week protecting the rights of first responders, including EMTs, firefighters, and other rescue workers from being fired over after-hours cannabis use. This is a good sign towards normalization in the state of Maryland as they continue to mature their operations and policies. Now let's check in on Michigan with Amie Carter.
I'm Amie Carter with Michigan Weedsters for this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News. In a major bust in southwest Michigan, police seized over 2,000 pounds of cannabis, along with psychedelics and a butane hash oil operation. The operation, located just 60 feet from a home with young children, raised some serious safety concerns. Multiple individuals are facing charges, and a hazmat team was called in to handle the cleanup. On a different note, February wasn't the best month for Michigan cannabis sales, which fell by 7.6% compared to last year. But don't worry, over $331 million in tax revenue from recreational cannabis is being distributed to local municipalities and schools, ensuring the community benefits from this industry. And in some more local news, a Macomb Township man is facing felony charges after authorities found nearly 120 pounds of cannabis and $7,000 in cash linked to illegal sales in his truck. And again, don't forget to mark your calendars for April 5th, which is Hash Bash in Ann Arbor at high noon. Cannot wait to see you there. That's your quick scoop for this week. I'm Amie Carter with Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
That'll do it for the A block or first section of Cannabis Coast to Coast News, but we have more state reports. Plus, here in Massachusetts, it's the New England Cannabis Convention at the Heinz Convention Center in Boston. Over 300 vendors and dozens of speakers are expected to attract a crowd of upwards of 30,000 attendees this weekend. PCM TV founder Jimmy Young is overing that this weekend. Cannabis Coast to Coast News continues after this break.
In the topless category of home grow with the rosin relief bomb collabs.
Ready to take your craft to the next level? Imagine faster extractions, purer products, and more profits. Sounds good, right? At Pure 5 Extraction, we've revolutionized cannabis extraction with our game-changing technology. No solvents, no heat, just the cleanest, most natural process on the market. Whether you're a boutique grower or a large-scale operation, Pure 5 has the tools to elevate your business worldwide. Visit pure5extraction.com today. Pure 5 Extraction, because your plants deserve the best. In Willow Creek, Rory, renowned for birdwatching, embraced nature's elegance. Preparing for his woodland sojourn, he used Grape Focus THC Mist from Yellow Labs. Each spritz honed his senses, capturing avian beauty. Immersed in the forest symphony, Rory's lens froze vibrant moments. Emerging at twilight, gratitude filled him for the mist's clarity. Recalling Find Yellow Labs near you, Rory ordered more of his mist from
Welcome back to Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Alaine Pinto, and this is the B block or second section of our news show. There's an ugly trend in new cannabis legal states who are charged with offering opportunities to those most impacted by the failed war on drugs. These social equity applicants get a chance to jump the line for licensure. But not having any capital to launch a business has caused many of these applicants to become targets of investors who see a way to take advantage of their lack of business acumen. One of those companies is fighting back through the courts. Here's Mark Allen from Illinois with that story and more.
What's up, everybody? I'm Mark Allen, the Chicago clone guy, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News, just outside of Chicago, Illinois. This is Bird. Thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to talk about Cannabis Development Company, also known as Can Co. They're actually suing their former social equity partner for reneging on a deal. They allege that Mr. McCade Jr. used them to help get a commercial craft grow license, only to pretty much dump them at the end of it when he received the license. So the big company is now going to sue the little guy. On other side news, I'm actually friends with a hemp farmer social equity applicant that was going to be the social equity applicant for another large commercial grow facility, but decided not to because they were only going to give him a tiny percentage, and then he wasn't going to have any type of say in the business operations at all. So they ended up picking another social equity licensed person, but after they got up and going, they ditched that gentleman. So the guy that was going to be that social equity license, he ended up getting, well, kind of screwed out of his license. So it seems like it's going both ways in here in Illinois. Definitely very interesting. Some positive news going on in Illinois. Since it's warming up, there's actually events, consumption events that are starting to form and be organized. The next one that I found out about is actually going to be in Elgin, Illinois on April 22nd. It is called the Boats and Hash competition, hosted by the IRC, Illinois Rosin Collective. This is going to be in Elgin, Illinois. It's going to be focusing on vendors. It's going to have artists. There's going to be DJs. There's also going to be guest speakers focusing on mycology, which is very interesting to me. And they're going to be focusing more on hash conversations. So if you're around for that, check it out. It's in Elgin, Illinois at the end of April. You can find it on Instagram or Facebook. But that sums up this portion of the news for the Illinois report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Mark Allen, the Chicago clone guy. Checking out.
Next up, a disturbing story about the trickle-down impact of the new administration's crackdown on illegals in this country. A Milwaukee resident named Ma Yang has been deported to Laos over a cannabis trafficking conviction from 2020. She had spent some time behind bars for her cannabis crime, and that's when her green card was revoked. When she checked in for scheduled appointment with the ICE in February, she was detained and on March 6th was deported back to Laos, where she was born in 1988, but was raised in the U.S. after her parents emigrated to this country. Now she says the U.S. has sent her back to die. There is a GoFundMe page to help Ma Yang get back to the United States, and you can find it on the screen or search Ma Yang GoFundMe. Yang has 5 children, ages 5 to 22, and just became a grandmother. These stories continue to pile up as this new policy continues to upend families who have American citizenship but ties to foreign nations. Next up, let's check in with Tina Tasaka in Nevada and with the tribal nations there.
I'm Tina Tasaka with 420 Technologies, and this is the Nevada and Tribal Nations Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. In the Reno Gazette-Journal, the Nevada Clean Air Act is under attack. The journal reports that the Nevada Clean Indoor Air Act, NCIAA, faces a challenge from Assembly Bill 76, which seeks to allow indoor smoking in cannabis consumption lounges. This contradicts the NCIAA's goal of protecting the public from secondhand smoke. Health experts warn that cannabis smoke contains harmful toxins similar to tobacco. Opponents argue Nevada should strengthen, not weaken, smoke-free laws and urge residents to oppose AB 76. The Oneida Indian Nation in New York has expanded their recreational marijuana business earlier in 2025. Verana Collective now has 2 dispensaries open in Sherrill and Chittenango. These join 2 existing shops in Verana, bringing high-quality, locally grown cannabis products closer to Syracuse. The Oneidas plan further expansion later this year. Unlike state-regulated dispensaries, Their business operates under tribal oversight but follows similar quality standards. Taxes collected go toward tribal government operations. The expansion reflects strong demand and positive customer response to their competitive pricing and product variety. Congratulations to this tribe. That's it for the Nevada highlights and tribal nations. I'm Tina Tasaka with 420 Technologies and Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Idaho is a state with one of the most strict cannabis laws in the country. It's an automatic $300 fine now if you are caught possessing even a small amount of cannabis. Plus, the state legislature there continues to try to pass a law that would eliminate the right of its citizens to change laws based on a ballot question. Needless to say, there are plenty of people in that state and all around the country who see how that state is trying to get around democracy. This week, that same legislature held hearings on why a medical program is necessary, and they used the story of a decorated veteran to make its point. U.S. Air Force veteran Jeremy Kitsaber testified before the state legislature to explain to those lawmakers that he carries with him prescribed drugs like hydrocodone, morphine, and oxycodone. Pretty much an opioid overdose waiting to happen. He wants to get off those prescribed medications and use cannabis to combat his PTSD and chronic pain. However, there is no legal medical program in that state, and Kitsaber is frustrated with the system of the country he represented and served for years. Now let's check in with Joe Parsons in Virginia.
I'm Joe Parsons with the Virginia Cannabis Connection by Higher Education's Coffee Talk, sponsored by 97.5 3WV in Charlottesville. Today on Coffee Talk, I had a very special guest, one you might recognize, Scott McStacy. He was that gentleman that was building a house out of hemp. So Scott, thank you so much for being here today. Now, word on the street is that you have a new mobile education center. So please tell us about that.
Yes, thank you, Joe. So we have opened the Hemptastic Ideas Mobile Hemp School. And this is a school that I can pull in a trailer and come to you and teach all about cannabis and hemp. We focus on everything from the ancient history of cannabis all the way up to the modern commercial applications. And we actually have got some events already scheduled for May and June. We're doing some hempcrete workshops. So, you know, it's good. It's coming along.
Awesome. And if someone wants to get involved in this, where do they go?
Well, you can go to my Facebook page. It's Seed to Structure, SEEDTOSTRUCTURE. It's Seed to Structure. And on that site, I will have all the announcements for all of our events.
And pricing and so forth?
Everything. Yes.
Outstanding. Well, Scott, thank you so much. And also, as a little reminder, I am going to be going out to that same house that Scott was working on. Look forward to giving everyone a full update on that. And anything else that you would like to announce, Scott?
Well, just say everybody have a hempy day.
That sounds awesome. All right, well, that is going to do it for this week from the Virginia Cannabis Connection and Higher Education's Coffee Talk, sponsored by 97.5 3WV in Charlottesville and reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Joe Parsons. As always, stay lifted.
Bloomberg Intelligence released findings of a study they researched on cannabis use among young adults. Keep in mind that their definition of young adults was 18 to 24 years old. Since they were researching a product that is supposed to be used by adults over the age of 21, the results are already suspect. However, it shows that more people, whether they are considered young or not, are using cannabis daily than drinking alcohol. With the exception of the hot hemp marketplace of products made from Delta 8 THC, it shows how easy access to these products have hurt the alcohol industry. It also should explain why many alcohol companies like Canopy Growth and others are investing in THC-infused beverages, because if you can't beat them, why not join them? Besides the federal government, opened this Pandora's box for the launch of the hemp industry when it passed the Farm Bill of 2018, basically legalizing the cannabis sativa plant. Alcohol companies aren't the only businesses who are entering the space. Both MSOs Trulieve and Curaleaf have launched hemp-based THC beverages. Even though this was a self-reported study by Bloomberg, it showed 74% of young adults in that 18 to 24 category reported using cannabis instead of alcohol in the past week. At age 25 to 34, that number goes down to 65%. And then from 45 to 54 age group, that substitution goes down to 42%. For the 55 and older set, that figure goes all the way down to 18%. Now let's check in with Andrew Behringer in Washington, D.C.
I'm Andrew Behringer with the Washington, D.C. report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Recently, the CDC has unveiled a new comprehensive cannabis strategic plan amid shifting landscape in a significant development that reflects the nation's evolving relationship with cannabis. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has quietly released its first ever cannabis strategic plan. This comes as states continue to implement varying degrees of legalization while questions persist about the plant's long-term health impacts. The CDC officials cite two primary motivations behind the plan: the dramatic increase in the THC potency in modern cannabis products and the steadily growing number of Americans using cannabis in various forms. The comprehensive strategy rests on 5 core pillars: monitoring usage trends, advancing scientific research, building capacity within states and local authorities, supplementing healthcare systems, and partnering with schools and community organizations. Now, this plan outlines specific initiatives, including reviewing medical cannabis benefits, developing educational materials, and expanding data collection to be better understood and used out in the industry. Noticeably, the CDC has identified several demographic groups of particular concern, including workers who are pregnant and women, and adolescents, while focusing investigations on issues ranging from substance use disorder to workplace safety and driving impairment. Perhaps most significant is what many policy advocates are calling a marked shift in federal positioning. While safety concerns dominate the documents, the CDC explicitly acknowledges potential therapeutic benefits of cannabis, a dramatic departure from the decades of federal resistance to recognize any medical value from the plant. This acknowledgement aligns with recent federal rescheduling discussions that have been indicated potentially medical applications for cannabis. Well, that's the Washington, D.C. report. I'm Andrew Behringer reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Our European report with Ben Stevens will return next week, but Debbie Facey is here with her weekly look at the Canadian cannabis market.
This is Debbie Facey with the Canadian Coast to Coast Cannabis News Report. So, in Vancouver, using something called the mechanical lung, they are looking at what company is creating and producing the best pre-rolls. And that is by utilizing this machine as if it was an actual sucking person motion, and they are seeing how well the spliffs burn, and that also what kind of ash does it produce. We should all know that the white ash is good ash. Next, what we have is the tariffs that are affecting most of our Canadian companies, containers, and packaging, due to the fact that most Canadians did use manufacturers within the States. That is now implementing the cost on the packaging as well as the bud. So we are hoping to find some sort of solution when it comes to that, so our cannabis in Canada does not become too expensive. And last but not least, we have Aurora that has found a powdery mildew, by the name of PM2, which is something that is affecting the grows. They are hoping to be able to attack this so they don't have to use more pesticides and grow a lot more clean, great cannabis. This is Debbie Facey with the Canadian Coast to Coast Cannabis News Report. Peace.
That'll do it for the B block, and when we come back, we'll go back to NECANN with PCM TV founder Jimmy Young, who always seems to find interesting people with a story to tell at these trade shows. The C block is next as Cannabis Coast to Coast News continues after this.
And Corvain, I got to tell you, when I heard the first story, when I asked Anthony, I go, so why did you name it 40 Tons? You want to walk me through that a little bit?
So,
I'll hold the microphone. I know you want to hold the mic, you can hold your own mic, but let me hold this one. Is that all right?
It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Now, let me tell you my cannabis story. You know, I've had 4 major surgeries in the past 23 years and suffer from osteoarthritis with a variety of metal parts in my body and one on deck. Now, thanks to those chronic pain issues, I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore. So I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weedgets filtration system. What? The Weedgets.com, Weedgets, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product that cools the smoke from everyone's favorite flower. The guy that started this was a pretty good medical device manufacturer, and he created this maze pipe that cools the smoking process from 1300 degrees Fahrenheit upon inflammation down to just 90 degrees when it reaches your mouth. That's right, 1300 down to 90. That's why this maze pipe is amazing. Now, add in the code of PCM TV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weedgets.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind.
Michigan Weedsters is hosting a lobby day this Wednesday. As challenges arise, the Michigan cannabis community is committed to protecting our hard-won industry. Please join us for a lobby day in Lansing on March 26th. We must support our small businesses in Michigan, as this tax hike will primarily benefit large corporations. It's essential to intervene whenever there is government overreach or when rights are being compromised, leading to inflated costs for businesses and consumers. We need to stand united for what is best for the people of our state. Higher taxes could drive small businesses out of the market. Join the Michigan Weedsters in Lansing on Wednesday to advocate for our rights.
Welcome back to Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Alaine Pinto. This is the final section, or C block, of this week's show, and final reminder to download the PCM TV app at the Google Play or App Store. It's free and has links to over 60 videos produced by PCM TV that documents the fight to end cannabis prohibition in our time. Next up, a check on the publicly traded cannabis stocks that are taking a whipping in the stock markets. Here's Doug Miller, who is high on Wall Street.
I'm Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's Cannabis Stock Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. The cannabis sector has been in a slump with the ETF MSOS down 68% in the past year. And while valuations have tumbled, a few companies are standing out by keeping their dividends steady and in some cases even increasing them. Innovative Industrial Properties just announced a first quarter dividend of $1.90 per share, up from last year's $1.80. And since 2016, IIP has consistently raised dividends. Turning Point Brands also bumped its dividend by 7%, and Scott's Miracle Grow has held its dividend steady at 66 cents per share, even as it plans to spin off its struggling hydroponics unit. And not all news is good news, as Advanced Flower Capital slashed its dividend to 33 cents, down from 48 cents. So as the cannabis market fights through this turbulence, these dividend payers offer a little stability for investors seeking greener pastures. And that's this week's Cannabis Stock Report. Reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News, I'm Doug Miller.
It seems that every week there is another story about a recall of cannabis flower that has been contaminated by a number of dangerous additives. This week, that state is Washington. Here's Matthew Friedlander with more.
Hi, I'm Matthew Friedlander with Skagit Organics, coming to you with the Washington State Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast. Today's report is going to focus on a recall notice that went out recently and how that is connected to some changes at the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board. So as I said, the LCB did just send out the state's largest recall notice, covers about 150 products under a number of different product names, but all operated by one licensee. This licensee is one of the largest here in the state, Northwest Cannabis Solutions. Now, it's important to note that these products have not failed for pesticides. They were recalled for the concern for high pesticide levels. This comes after, I believe, my understanding is that the LCB got a hold of some unlinked research and development tests that this company had conducted, showing that those products had failed for pesticides. But the products that were recalled, that were in the retail stores, all had clean pesticide tests, from my understanding. Now, this is interesting because the LCB recently put out a notice to some labs that research and development tests were supposed to be input and reported to the LCB. Up to this point, everyone's understanding in the industry was that these R&D tests were not reported to the LCB and therefore not subject to public record requests and scrutiny by the Liquor and Cannabis Board. The LCB is now saying that that is not the fact, and so there's a decent amount of confusion here in the state. They've also attempted to get R&D tests from other labs for other cannabis companies. There has been new leadership at the LCB, and the new director, who I believe is either not yet confirmed or maybe was confirmed Friday, is trying to pull the agency back from interfacing with the public. They want less monthly meetings. They want no live public commentary period during those meetings. Only written requests and comments would be allowed. Pretty big change for a regulatory board that very much needs to hear from the public and from people in the industry and consumers of the products they're regulating. So we'll keep an eye on that and we'll keep you updated in future reports. But that's what I've got for you today from Washington, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
The New England Cannabis Convention started back in 2014, 2 years before Massachusetts residents passed the adult use legalization bill in 2016. And now that conference has turned into a monster with close to 300 vendors and an expected crowd of 30,000 people. One of those was our own PCM TV founder, Jimmy Young. Here's his report.
In the topicals category of homegrown, with the rosin relief balm collabs.
It's the 11th annual New England Cannabis Convention this past weekend in Boston. And like the Revolutionary War over 250 years ago, you might remember that this country was actually born in Boston. That's when the nation's first settlers created the United States of America by defeating the British in the Revolutionary War. Now there's another revolution. Cannabis legalization movement that can boast of 24 adult use legal states, 41 states who have decriminalized the plant and have some form of medical marijuana program. At NECANN, close to 300 vendors showed up this year, from the pre-roller group to a variety of other exhibitors, complete with breakout rooms, panel discussions on stage, and plenty of positivity for an industry that has been battered and bruised over the first 3 months of this year, and now Add that onto the struggles with a devastating market correction over the past few years, it's been a very difficult time. Profits are declining, valuations are going down, stocks are completely declining, and prohibitionists are reinvigorated in Washington, D.C. You would never know that over the past 2 days at NECANN in Boston. There was tremendous positive energy when the industry gets to surround itself with like-minded, passionate entrepreneurs.
Can you give some hope to the people in this industry that we're going to be okay?
I mean, a lot of people aren't, unfortunately. You know, I mean, that's the reality. And I always joke, I'm a capitalist, but this is the market, right? But I will say, one thing that's really interesting is you just never know who's going to show up, even in a saturated market, and mess stuff up, and disrupt and have a great product that everybody suddenly wants, or to come in on a niche. And then, if you look at the cup, the awards that they just had, there are new people we never heard of who suddenly are winning, taking a whole category. So things move around. And then the other thing a lot of people realize is, listen, a lot of the stuff you see, it's just the name, right? So maybe you're smoking this weed one day from one company, and then the next day it might be a different company. So there's just a lot going on behind the scenes. I think the companies that are caring about what the consumer is paying attention to, that aren't completely caught up in all of the politics and the regulation, which you have to tend to it. But I don't really have that much great news other than for consumers. Prices are pretty low right now. If you know what to shop,
$100 or less on.
Sure, but even if you're buying, the other thing is prices even for good craft stuff. You got your $40 eighths, and yeah, it's a little higher, it's a little costlier, but those are the companies that we need to survive. Unfortunately, we've lost a couple of those recently as well. But I think I try to look at this from a consumer standpoint. We have a lot of B2B readers, a lot of business readers, but everything on Talking Joints memo is meant for whether you're a new user, an old head, to come in. So they can read about the bad things going on, but there's exciting stuff too.
Did you notice he looked at me and said old head? Just remember, the last name is Young, so I'm always going to be forever young.
One of the best stories this past weekend at NECANN was the establishment of Justice Row, headlined by the 40Tons group out of Los Angeles. And if you're not familiar with this brand, they are probably one of the best examples of how those who have been most impacted by the failed war on drugs are using this opportunity to go legit. In this case of Corvain Cooper, a man who is sentenced to life in prison until on the final weekend of his first term, President Donald Trump gave him his freedom.
What's next for you guys? Because, as you know, you left behind a lot of people that are still in jail for nonviolent cannabis crimes, right?
Right. So we do a letter writing campaign, and we give out trays. We got over 10,000 trays worldwide that we give away, so they can be, every time we go somewhere, they come with us, right? So usually people don't change their rolling tray that often, right? So then that puts our prisoner in your home, in your household, and information, and they're the forefront of our brand. It's not us, it's them, right? So everything is about the prisoner. Everything is about furthering them. And I got out off of popularity, really, right? So I did BT, Up in Smoke, in Black America, right? And Nas did that for me. I did Business of Drugs, episode 5 on Netflix, From in Prison, right? You can watch that. I did Complex, National Geographic. We made it to the front page of New York Times, and those are the things that you have to do in order to, you have to scream. And me and my attorney, Patrick McGruel, reached 176,000 signatures from Americans, and we had to just scream in order to get to this point.
The beautiful thing about this group is that it's a true family affair. Corvain's story was helped along by Anthony and L'Oreal Allegretti, the C-suite of 40Tons. Anthony was Corvain's best friend in high school, and his wife, L'Oreal, is the CEO. Her story stands as a great example of why women are taking a strong leadership role in a variety of businesses and leadership groups in this industry.
Well, joining me now on the couch that's about to be given away at some point here from the 40Tons booth is L'Oreal Allegretti. She is, aren't you the CEO? CEO and co-founder. Come on, any guy in a heterosexual relationship knows the woman is always the king. Okay, come on. At some point, our our populace will understand maybe we need to put a female in the White House. I'm just throwing it out there as an idea.
You know what? You might be onto something, Jimmy. Okay, you just might be.
Tried really hard. Anyway, let's go back to the 40 Tons brand, because first of all, I had no idea that was Corvain when I walked in, and obviously I knew his story.
Yes.
And talking to him, I mean, I don't want to say I'm in awe, but I was in awe. I mean, but going through it and being behind the bar, it's almost as difficult as being on the outside looking at loved ones behind bars.
Yes.
So how challenging was this for you? Who helped you through this?
You know, I would say God, and then I had some strong women in my life, grandmother, great-grandmother, right? These strong women helped raise me, you know, as I was growing up. So I saw their strength, and I kind of just drew from that, and they never let me down, you know. Unfortunately, they're all passed away now, but at that time, that was my rock, you know. There was, you know, times where I had to hold 2 and 3 different jobs just to keep the lights on, and then give Anthony some money on his commissary so that he can call for one of the kids' birthdays. Things like that. These are real things. My kids even, you know, current day would say, "We never saw you cry, Mom. How did you get through this? Like, that was horrible." Like, they realized what was going on now that they're older. And my response was, I had to be strong for you guys. I had to be mom and dad and everything else. So I cried, but it was only in the shower, because that's how you can cover it up. You know, you're looking wet, and right, so you can still cry and be okay. But that's when I did that. But I knew that if I didn't do this and show my children that there is going to be better days ahead of us, then we would all crumble. Like, there was no wavering on how I was going to raise them, continue raising them. There was no wavering. Help support my husband, you know, because at the time he did what they say, committed a crime, and, you know, he served the time, and unfortunately the family served the time too. Right. You know, there's a lot of politics when your loved one goes to jail. You know, the people that they leave behind, the aftermath, you know, and it's not free. Phone calls are not free, you know, so it was very challenging time, but I got through it, Jimmy, and look at what we're doing today, and all of the great traction that we're making, and the building up the communities, and locking arms with folks in Justice Row and all the other brands. So it's exciting times.
Well, socially responsible capitalism is a term that I learned back in the 90s as a sportscaster here in the Boston area, okay? And I have seen quite a few companies in the cannabis space embrace that philosophy, but I have never seen one that has really lived it. Do you know what I'm saying? You have lived it. And by the way, I love the fact she's the CEO of this company, and she's kind of dropped in the fact that she's also a mother. How many kids do you have?
3 children and 2 really large dogs. Like, my dogs are 200 pounds. So, and I have 2 of them.
Mastiffs?
Yes, they are mastiffs, Jimmy. Yes.
I know my dogs. And besides, well, we could talk about yellow labs another time. Okay. It's another story for another day. But where would you like to see 40 Tons going? I mean, you know Steve D'Angelo from Last Prisoner Project, right? He announced the Last Prisoner Project on one of my shows live back in 2019. I met him in Jamaica, okay? And he's always said, if I ever resurrect my show again, I want it to be on your network. I'm like, great, I'm waiting, you know. But in the meantime, he's trying to get every prisoner that's in behind, and you guys are joining that as well. But you've lived it.
Yes, you know, no one can take my story away from me. It's actually real. It is my life. You know, when they say, when did you start 40 Tons? I say that's a loaded question, because 40 Tons was started that 20-something years ago when Anthony and Corvain first started selling their first eighth, right? And how that snowballed into federal time and all of that. So where I see 40 Tons going at this point is to the moon. Like, nothing can stop us. Nothing will stop us. The 40 Tons and the movement and the disruption that we've made in the industry for greater change, right? I think it is bigger than myself. It's bigger than Corvain. It's bigger than Anthony. This should be able to continue on for years and years and years, because it is a great cause. People are still being incarcerated over this plant. People need to understand what their responsibility is, just to know, just to be aware, to be educated on what's going on. The stats, you know, at some, you know, of prisoners people going to jail, the Black and brown community, how that's affected.
4 times more than white people, and we use the product the same amount. So if you don't recognize why that is, I mean, that has to be told, and a lot of people just don't understand that.
No, they have no idea, and we have core museum here that depicts what those stats are, and it's in your face and it's disruptive and it's meant to evoke emotion in people and just to be aware. You're right, people don't know and they should be aware, and that's why we have our letter writing campaign, which we're advocating for those folks, similar to Last Prisoner Project. It takes a village to communicate this to everybody, so it's not just one person's job, right?
From NECANN in Boston, I'm Jimmy Young reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
If you are a regular consumer of cannabis, this next story shouldn't shock you. A new survey commissioned by NecoKick.com concludes that cannabis smokers are more stressed out since President Trump took office. 65% of regular users report increased stress levels compared to 55% before the change in administration. One state that can totally relate to that is Colorado, and that's where Xavier Jallet is, and here's his Colorado report.
I'm Xavier Jallet, chairman of the Colorado chapter of the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce and a non-attorney professional at the McDonald Hopkins law firm. And here's what's happening in the Colorado cannabis industry this week. I've got one story to share with you all, and that is the story of Mammoth Farms filing a lawsuit against the Marijuana Enforcement Division, or the MED. The MED is the regulatory body responsible for regulating and overseeing the adult use and medical marijuana market here in Colorado. And this is the second time that Mammoth Farms has filed a complaint against the MED. This complaint is multifaceted, with two specific complaints alleged against the MED. The first is that the MED has failed to prevent the diversion of regulated marijuana products into the black market, which has deprived citizens of Colorado and businesses of important revenue on the tax side and then on the business side. And the second portion of the complaint alleges that the MED has similarly failed to prevent the introduction of intoxicating hemp cannabinoid compounds into the regulated market in Colorado. Listeners may know that Colorado is one of the only states or one of many states, I should say at this point, that does prohibit the use of hemp-derived intoxicating compounds in regulated cannabis marijuana products. And this lawsuit alleges the further growing divide between the hemp cannabis and marijuana cannabis industries in the state. Interestingly, this also alleges that the MED has failed to prevent the diversion of product, which is an important complaint for marijuana businesses in the state to make. And Mammoth Farms has subsequently become either a very respected and loved entity because of filing this lawsuit, or on the other hand, other constituents see this as an attempt to gum up the evolving and growing marijuana industry here in Colorado. But all that aside, it is emblematic of continued issues in Colorado between regulators and businesses that have led to the year-over-year decline of cannabis sale revenue here in the state. And this is an important case to keep an eye on for the future development of the Colorado cannabis market. That's it for the Colorado cannabis news this week. I'm Xavier Jallet, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
And finally tonight, there might be a new powerful advocate to hasten the acceptance of medical marijuana in England. Believe it or not, it's the king who is leading the charge. King Charles is being treated for cancer, and now he is exploring more holistic forms of treatment. A Buckingham Palace insider shared the story that King Charles has always been a champion for homeopathic medicines, and now as a cancer patient, he believes he should try it too. That same source said he is willing to try all treatments for his cancer in the book, and some that are not. Getting high with the king, even for medicinal purposes, would be pretty cool, though, don't you think? That's this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Alaine Pinto. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Consume it responsibly.
I think I messed up. Did you know there's a place that covers all the cannabis news you need? Welcome to Pro Cannabis Media, your go-to for all things cannabis. PCM is the CNBC of weed, bringing you the latest news and talk shows with a twist. We've got 16 state correspondents and multimedia journalists from around the US and Canada.
Hey everybody, it's Brandon Jones with Be Green Distribution with the Missouri Cannabis Report.
I'm Karen Black from Greenfinger Consulting with the Arizona Cannabis Report.
I'm Amie Carter from Michigan Weedsters.
Andrew Behringer here reporting from Washington, D.C.
Debbie Facey with the Canadian Toke of the Week.
It all started back in 2018 when founder Jimmy Young kicked off the In the Weeds podcast. His mission? Documenting the fight to end cannabis prohibition. Fast forward to today and we've got Cannabis Coast to Coast with Alaine Pinto, delivering the nation's only TV-style cannabis news show.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Cannabis Coast to Coast, PCM TV's weekly roundup of industry news from California to New York. I'm Alaine Pinto.
As of August 2024, PCM has racked up over 1.2 million views and 14.5 million impressions on our YouTube channel. With 15,000 subscribers and growing, our reach is spreading like wildfire. PCM's website, YouTube, Rumble, Discord, Roku, Twitch, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and even our very own PCM TV app. Get your cannabis news fix with Pro Cannabis Media. We're here to keep you informed and entertained. Stay tuned and stay lifted.